Arcane Universe Chapter 21. In the face of almost absolute darkness, Feng Chou activated Qiankun Pagoda at high power and used scanning instead of his eyes. After Qiankun Pagoda took over Feng Chou's vision function, Feng Chou's eyes suddenly lit up. Not only did it light up, but the perspective also changed from the limited vision of his eyes to a holographic perspective. It felt very wonderful, because he could not adapt to the holographic perspective. Feng Chou staggered as he walked, but others only thought that he was panicking because he could not adapt to the darkness. After gradually adapting, Feng Chou began to observe around. In this almost absolute darkness, the drow elves and the bear goblin looked very natural. These two creatures had the gift of night vision, which was a thermal vision ability. The humans were very flustered. After losing their vision, they could only rely on the guidance of the rope in their hands to determine the direction they were going. Without the help of vision, they had to summon up their courage for every step. Fortunately, the road was very flat, otherwise these human slaves would not be able to move an inch. Feng Chou quickly focused his attention on Simon behind him. His eyes were slightly closed and seemed to have lost his vision, but his footsteps were steady and there was no hesitation in each step, which made Feng Chou feel suspicious. Qiankun Pagoda told Feng Chou that Simon did not completely close his eyes, he just squinted his eyes. Did this guy also have night vision? It was not strange when he thought about it. For the caravan guards traveling in the Underdark, it was almost necessary to spend money to hire a mage to permanently have night vision. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for an ordinary warrior to move an inch in the Underdark. In the beginning, the cave was relatively narrow. Feng Chou also saw a few forks that were obviously blocked by the mud-to-stone spell, but as the team moved forward, the cave gradually became spacious. As the cave became spacious, the forks in the cave wall became bigger and more numerous. Those forks that were too big seemed to be difficult to block even with magic. Seeing that the patrol team in charge of escorting the slaves began to become nervous, Feng Chou suddenly had a bad feeling. Sure enough, before the group had gone far, something strange suddenly appeared in Feng Chou's sight. 20 meters away, a protruding rock at the top of the cave suddenly emitted a faint light, and a light screen appeared next to the rock out of thin air. Rows of words appeared on the screen. Creature type, unknown physique, 24 strength, 31 dexterity, 33 spiritual power, 6 awareness, 21 intelligence, 4 physical assessment, healthy, mental evaluation, full, energy reaction. An unknown energy reaction exists in the organism's body. Seeing this, Feng Chou was slightly stunned. Then, he realized that Qiankun Pagoda had marked out the hidden monsters. Feng Chou looked around and saw that the monster was right above them. It was right in their path. He stared at the monster nervously, watching as the front of the slaves walked past the monster. Nothing happened. Seeing that the monster was getting closer and closer to him, Feng Chou's mind flashed with a light. Thinking of a possibility, Feng Chou patted Simon behind him and rushed forward. He was as light as a cat as he passed a few slaves and inserted himself in front. Because after entering the depths of the cave, everyone lost their vision. Some of the slaves were bold, some were timid, some walked fast, some walked slowly, and some people squeezed together. There were many places on the rope that had large gaps. Feng Chou passed 4 or 5 slaves and inserted himself in the gap closest to him. He also left a place for Simon. Simon's reaction was also very fast. He was stunned at first, but when he found that Feng Chou was just cutting the line and not taking the risk to escape, he immediately responded and followed. Simon scuttled behind Feng Chou, and they just happened to cross the marked rock above their heads. Just 2 seconds later, the rock suddenly separated from the top of the cave and turned into a sloth-like monster with long arms. It fell silently. The monster quietly landed on the shoulder of the last slave in the line. A pair of long arms that were longer than its body wrapped around the slave's neck. The human slave who was choked could not make any sound. He waved his arms in vain, stumbled 2 steps, and fell to the ground. The cave was very quiet. Other than the sound of footsteps, there was no other sound. The sound of the unlucky slave falling finally alerted the bear goblin not far away. The nearest bear goblin roared and rushed toward the fallen slave. He waved a huge mace and smashed it at the monster. Unfortunately, before the mace fell, the monster that was choking the slave's neck had already given up on its prey. It jumped from the slave's body like a flea and landed on a stone by the side of the road. The monster looked a little like a ball gibbon, but its movements were more agile than an ape's. After a few leaps, it disappeared into the complicated terrain of the cave. The poor human slave had just escaped the monster's choke, but he was smashed to a pulp by the bear goblin's mace. After accidentally killing the slave, the bear goblin was not upset. Instead, it seemed very happy. It grabbed the slave's body, tucked it under its armpit, and followed the line, leaving the poor guy's blood to spill along the way. Simon had wanted to ask Feng Chou what had happened, but what happened next was enough to explain the situation. The monster had killed the slave at the end of the line. If not for Feng Chou's reminder, Simon would have been the one at the end. The reason why Feng Chou was able to avoid this calamity was because he suddenly remembered that some predators would often choose the last member of the group as their target when hunting down a group of prey. This was because in most group animals, being left behind often meant being weak. There were only two reasons why the monster had let go of such a long line in front. First, it did not dare to attack such a large group. Second, it chose to attack the last member of the line. The loud sound of the bear goblin smashing the slave to death caused some commotion at the back of the line. A drow warrior shouted in broken Avondale, "Hold on tight to the rope. Don't panic. Continue forward." The slave's fear of drow and habitual obedience gradually calmed them down. In the end, the bear goblin who had smashed the slave to death had no choice but to give up his spoils of war. This was because the drow warrior leading the team thought that this would attract more monsters to attack. Reality proved that this attack was not a coincidence. Along the way, Feng Chou saw 7 or 8 monsters that were unique to the Underdark. For example, there was a spider whose body was as large as a millstone, with 8 long legs and a diameter of more than a meter. Its body was covered in black hair. When this spider turned into a shadow and snuck over in the dark, no one other than Feng Chou's Qiankun Pagoda scan discovered it. In the end, this spider was caught by a bear goblin, who was killed by the drow warrior. This was the first time he saw the drow warrior in action, and Feng Chou could not help but feel his scalp tingle. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 22. Drow warriors were different from human warriors. They had their own unique training methods. The biggest feature of this training method was that the warriors trained not only had the physique and strength of a warrior, but also the superb agility of a rogue. Drow warriors did not use shields, long handles, or large weapons. Their weapons were generally heavy dual swords or dual swords. Drow's martial arts could be said to be the perfect combination of strength and speed. Their dual swords could maintain a powerful lethality at extremely high speed. There was a saying in Chinese martial arts called dual sword watch, because the arms could not help the body to maintain balance when wielding the swords with both hands. The footwork of the feet became extremely important. The position of the feet not only helped to adjust the position of the swords and exert the power of the dual swords, but also helped the body to maintain balance. It could be said that most of the strength of a dual swordsman was in their footwork. The spider sneaked behind a bear goblin, pounced on him from behind, and bit the back of the unlucky guy's neck. This spider was obviously highly poisonous. After the bear goblin fell, it immediately stopped breathing. When drow warrior not far away saw the spider, he turned his hands and pulled out the dual swords on his back. His body moved and he had already raised his speed to the highest. His speed was like an arrow, but his feet were light and silent, giving people a very contradictory feeling. This drow warrior did not rush to the spider directly. He circled from the side to the back of the spider in an arc, then cut into the battle circle, and removed one of the spider's legs with the first slash. With one leg missing, the spider's movements were immediately limited, and it could not keep up with Drow's speed. As a result, drow warrior cut off one leg at a time. In a moment, the spider was cut into a legless meatball, and finally, its head was cut off by drow. From the time drow attacked to the time he cut off the spider's head, it only took a short 10 seconds. His feet were like the wind, and his swords were like lightning. Although the swords were fast, They were stable and accurate. Feng Chou felt a chill run down his spine when he saw this. This kind of dual saber technique, in Feng Chou's eyes, was simply amazing. He might not even be able to block a single saber strike. Seeing how powerful Dro was as a warrior, Feng Chou even doubted whether Simon, a level 6 warrior, could be a match for an ordinary level 5 Dro. Dro's martial arts were actually developed to deal with the special war environment of the Underdark. Although this martial art was powerful, it was difficult to use it in a large-scale battle. Moreover, it was very difficult to train. Only creatures like Dro, who had a lifespan 3 times that of humans, had enough time to train and master it. Feng Chou had Qiankun Pagoda confirm it over and over again before he reluctantly believed that other than his high agility, this terrifying Dro was really just a 5th-level warrior. A 5th-level warrior, to Dro, was just the lowest level of warrior cannon fodder. Among the Dro, only those who were above level 5 were considered qualified warriors of Dro. If a Dro did not have the talent of a priest or a mage, and could not successfully reach the level of a level 5 warrior before reaching adulthood, he would be regarded as a disgrace to his family and thrown into the arena. After confirming that this terrifying Dro was just a Dro warrior of the lowest level, Feng Chou, who was originally full of confidence, became a little depressed and fearful. Simon's expression did not change much. He should have already known that Dro was powerful. Along the way, the slave team encountered several more attacks. For example, a monster that looked like an octopus, with a thin membrane between its wrists, could glide silently in the cave. When this monster attacked, it would quietly glide to the top of the prey's head and release a dark spell to cover the target. Then, it would jump down from the top of the head and use its wrists and membrane to cover the entire prey, using its wrists to strangle the prey to death. There was also a type of spider that could shoot spider webs. This type of spider was larger than the previous ones that could move stealthily. It could shoot a spider web with a diameter of 3 meters at its prey from more than 20 meters away, trapping the prey. The spider web was very strong, and even the thick-skinned bear goblin could not rely on its own strength to break free after being trapped in the web. After the web-shooting spider trapped the prey with its web, it would pounce on the prey and inject venom. The venom would completely paralyze the prey, but it would not kill the prey. It would then pull the paralyzed prey back to its nest and store it as dry food. If the stealthily moving spiders and web-shooting spiders were troublesome, then the third type of spider they encountered was a disaster. This type of spider was slightly larger than the web-shooting spider, including its legs. It was about the size of a round table that could seat 7 or 8 people. Its body was gray in color and had black veins. This type of spider could not move stealthily or shoot webs. But seeing them appear, Dro and the others were extremely nervous. Without hesitation, they rushed forward with the bear goblin. As the battle began, Feng Chou realized that the spiders' carapaces were extremely hard. Even when the bear goblin's mace smashed into them, it did not cause much damage. Moreover, the spiders were extremely strong. The bear goblin was like a woman in front of them, pouncing on them easily. What was even more frightening was that the spiders did not appear alone. There were 6 of them at the same time. The 2 groups of Drows guards spent a lot of effort to kill the 6 spiders, at the cost of 8 bear goblin lives. In the chaos, Simon told Feng Chou that the spiders were called iron-striped spiders. They were a relatively common type of monster in the Underdark. Under Feng Chou's questioning, Simon told Feng Chou that the monster that attacked them at first was called a throat-locking monster. Although it was not very strong, it was very troublesome because this monster could hide its body heat and hide from night vision. The octopus-like monster was called the Shadow Beast. It was also a very troublesome monster in the Underdark. Like the throat-locking monster, they could hide from night vision. The stealthily moving spiders were called steel-haired spiders. The thick bristles on their bodies allowed them to sense slight vibrations in the air. They could determine the size and type of living creatures dozens of meters away from them based on the vibrations in the air and the ground. In addition, they had a stronger ability to move in the shadows than rogues. This made them the natural enemy of underground creatures like the throat-locking monster and the shadow beast that could hide from night vision. The spiders that shot webs were called web-shooting spiders. Simon told Feng Chou that in addition to spiders, the various lizards in the Underdark were also very scary. In the following journey, Feng Chou soon saw the power of the lizards in the Underdark. For example, there was a small lizard that could shoot its tongue more than 10 meters away. This lizard was called the arrow-tongue lizard. The tip of its tongue had an awl-like horny body. The speed at which the arrow-tongue lizard shot out its tongue was very shocking. Even with Feng Chou's extraordinary reaction speed, he could not see how it shot out its tongue, let alone dodge it. The tip of the arrow-tongue lizard's horny tongue was very hard and sharp. Under high-speed ejection, it could easily penetrate the thick plate armor on the bear goblin. Its tongue carried a lot of harmful bacteria. The bear goblin that was shot by it quickly lost its ability to move and was abandoned in the cave by its companions. There was also a large lizard called the limestone lizard. It was more than 3 meters long and could move freely on the walls of the cave. It had rough skin and thick flesh. It was very strong and was quite fierce. This lizard was also the ideal all-terrain mount in the Underdark. These monsters were very common in the Underdark. There were many of them and they were widely distributed. Simon gave Feng Chou this conclusion. There was no safe place in the Underdark. Report, select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 23. After more than 2 hours of trepidation in the pitch-black cave, the slaves finally saw a glimmer of light in front of the team. As the light grew stronger, they finally walked out of the cave and came to a huge cave. After coming out of the cave, the first thing that entered Leo's eyes was the seemingly endless fluorescent fungi above his head. The star-like fluorescence filled the cave with a faint light. In Leo's eyes, this place was as bright as day. In the middle of the fluorescent fungi, a waterfall hung down from the top of the cave, like a jade belt falling from the sky. The rumbling sound of the waterfall falling into the water came from afar. Under the fluorescence, there was an endless underground forest. The area of this cave was so huge that he couldn't see the end of it. After a new road that was nearly 3 meters wide extended out of the cave, it extended forward along the side of the huge cave and disappeared into the dense underground forest. At the side of the road at the exit of the cave, a large open space was cleared. There was a small camp by the side of the road with a few tents. There were 2 patrol guards in the camp, and the ones being guarded were actually a few humans. These humans were wearing decent clothes, and they were discussing something around a piece of paper. Seeing Feng Chou looking at the humans with some surprise, Simon explained in a low voice, "Those humans are artisan slaves living in the artisan area. Their treatment is much better than ordinary slaves like us. Not only are they able to eat and wear warm clothes, some skilled artisans can also get women, have their own houses, have children, and even get an education. Do you see that woman? That woman is most likely a human born in this city. The humans on the surface won't let women work as masons or architects." Only then did Feng Chou notice that among the humans, the one holding the blueprint was a tall woman. Feng Chou noticed that this woman's figure was somewhat similar to the Drow warrior's figure. He let Qiankun Pagoda bring up the results of her scan. Constitution, 54 strength, 55 agility, 53 spiritual power, 13 perception, 18 intelligence, 14 physical assessment, healthy spiritual assessment, full special energy response, and known this human woman actually had the profession level of a 6th level Drow warrior. In addition to these, Qiankun Pagoda also scanned some more interesting information. Just like Simon, this woman had put on some disguises. If Simon was pretending to be weak, then this woman was pretending to be ugly. Her face had gone through a simple makeup, which was almost impossible to see. The effect was also completely different from normal makeup. Normal makeup covered the flaws and magnified the strengths, but this woman's makeup covered the strengths and magnified the flaws. If it wasn't for Qiankun Pagoda's subtle scanning function, Feng Chou wouldn't have been able to tell. She also used makeup to cover up some of the characteristics of Drow's elven lineage. For example, she used black dye to dye her black hair with a little silver luster to make it pure black. Qiankun Pagoda also found that her ears had been surgically trimmed to remove the tips, making them look more like human ears. The slaves were driven to a clearing by the roadside. The woman stood on a large stone and loudly announced their next task. It turned out that this woman was the leader of these artisan slaves. Simon guessed right. She was an architect. Feng Chou and the other human slaves were going to build a small fortress here under the command of her and her companions. It was no wonder that the human slaves were transferred here. Building a house was difficult for the less intelligent cavemen, and the strength of ordinary goblins was too small to be suitable. Only humans and grey dwarves could do it. However, the grey dwarven slaves in Drow's underground city were precious artisans, and only the human serfs could do it. Under the command of this woman and the whipping of Drow's warriors, the human slaves were divided into several groups. A small group set up a large pot to cook food, and the majority were divided into several groups to dig the foundation. After more than 100 people started working, it became a mess. Simon went to Feng Chou and discussed with him. "When do you think we should leave?" Feng Chou thought for a moment and said, "We only have one chance, and the probability of successfully escaping is not high. I remember you said that Drow's tracking ability is very strong. Once we succeed in escaping, we have to leave the underground world in the shortest time possible. So I think we should be careful and not rush. Drow is building a fortress here. There must be a strong threat in this cave. Since there is a threat and it is guarding a path, this fortress will not be built. I think we will stay here for a long time." After listening to Feng Chou's analysis, Simon nodded and agreed with him. In the next few days, the two buried their heads in work. On the first day of rest, there was a small incident in the camp. In this camp, there was a clear hierarchy. Drow of the patrol team had his own tent. Bear goblin slave soldiers could only sleep around the tent, and the artisan slaves seemed to have a higher status than the bear goblin. They also had their own tents. The other human slaves could only sleep on the ground like the bear goblin. Fortunately, although the underground world was cold, there was no need to worry about rain. The cave was rich in vegetation, and the slaves could light bonfires to warm themselves. It was not as uncomfortable as the stone houses. As slaves who had sneaked in, Feng Chou and Simon could only sleep at the outermost area. If they were beaten to death by the bear goblin at this time, it would be a pity. So the two of them could only take turns to keep watch. First, Feng Chou kept watch. When Simon fell asleep, he began to slack off. He let Qiankun Pagoda keep watch while he sat on the ground and slept with his head on his knees. He didn't know how long he slept, but he was suddenly woken up by Qiankun Pagoda. Through the scan view shared by Qiankun Pagoda, he saw some interesting scenes. At this time, the whole camp was quiet. Only the two patrol teams who were on duty were moving around the periphery of the camp. As they moved, the cold sound of chain armor colliding with each other could be heard. But in Qiankun Pagoda's shared view, in addition to the patrol team's activities, there were some other people sneaking around. A skinny rogue was sneaking towards the artisan's tent. As for his purpose was very clear. It should be the independent tent in the center of the artisan slave's tent that belonged to the female architect. From Qiankun Pagoda's close-up shot of the bulge under his lower abdomen, Feng Chou could easily judge that he should have a brain full of lust. This was a level 4 rogue, but with such strength, sneak attacking a level 6 Drow warrior was absolutely looking for death. There were basically no women among the ordinary human slaves in the underground city. Even if there were, they wouldn't live long. Many human slaves had never seen a woman since they came here, and in their foreseeable fate, as long as there was no miracle, they wouldn't have the opportunity to meet a woman. In such a crowd, it was not surprising that a guy whose brain was burned by lust would appear. In addition to this level 4 rogue, there were also some drooling bear goblin slave soldiers sneaking around the periphery of the camp. What these bear goblin didn't expect was that they were actually the mantis hunting the cicada, and there was a group of orioles behind them. Report select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 24. A bear goblin crept towards Feng Chou's position. There were many human slaves sleeping on this dry and stony land. What the drooling bear goblin didn't know was that there was a more hidden figure behind him. Feng Chou was familiar with the figure. He quickly judged that it was a tigerman in beast form. Under Qiankun Pagoda's scan, the tigerman in stealth appeared in Feng Chou's eyes. Its body was humanoid, but its whole body was covered with thick striped hair. Its head was a combination of a tiger and a human face, and its hands were sharp tiger claws. The tigerman was on all fours, and its body was low. Its movements were silent, and it quickly approached the sneaky bear goblin from behind. The tigerman was born with the ability to sneak. Although they couldn't use the power of shadows to hide their existence like rogues, they had camouflage stripes on their bodies. Coupled with the dim light in the underground world, their stealth effect was no worse than that of low-level rogues. If it weren't for Qiankun Pagoda's scanning function, Feng Chou would never have been able to discover the tigerman in stealth. About 10 meters away from Feng Chou, the bear goblin stopped and seemed to be choosing a target. He quickly stared at Feng Chou. Feng Chou looked relatively tall and burly, and seemed to have a lot of meat. He was also excluded from the group of slaves. Among the slaves, this was the performance of a weak chicken. He looked like an excellent target. After choosing a satisfactory target, the bear goblin was about to move, but the Grim Reaper behind him was almost on his back. After entering the best attack range, the tigerman gently pounced on the bear goblin's back. One of his claws scratched the bear goblin's neck like lightning, crushing his subconscious roar. Then, the tigerman picked up the earth spirit bear that was even more burly than him and quickly retreated, entering the underground forest in the blink of an eye. While the tigerman had taken care of the bear goblin, there was also movement in the female architect's tent. The curtain of the tent was opened, and the female architect came out with a thin figure. She used a rope to wrap around the thin human's neck and hung him on a wooden pole erected at the entrance of her tent. After a spasm of struggle, the thin human lost his breath. The female architect admired her masterpiece and returned to her tent as if nothing had happened. The next day, Drow's patrol found that many bear goblin were missing. In the next few days, the bear goblin became well behaved. From the second day onwards, new slaves were escorted every day, but they didn't stay at the construction site. Drows escorted them along the road into the depths of the big cave. According to Qiankun Pagoda's statistics, nearly 1,000 human slaves were escorted over. According to Simon's estimation, this number accounted for almost half of the human slaves in Dro City. In the following period of time, Feng Chou discovered a few more tigerman attacks. These tigermen didn't seem to have high intelligence. They didn't target the slaves in the camp. Instead, they targeted the bugbears in the outer patrols, who seemed to have more meat. When the tigermen attacked for the third time, the drows launched an ambush and killed a few tigermen. Finally, the tigermen's rampant momentum was curbed. A month later, a D-shaped fortress appeared at the entrance of the cave. The D-shaped side was close to the entrance of the cave, completely sealing the entrance of the cave. People who came out of the cave could only enter the fortress through the gate. The semicircular side of the fortress faced the open cave forest. The core of the fortress was a 3-story defensive tower. The tower was twice as tall as the walls outside. During the construction of the fortress, Feng Chou saw the amazing effect of magic in construction. When building the stone wall, the female architect asked the slaves to fill the gaps between the stones with mud. When the stone wall was finished, a few young Dro mages wearing hoods came to the fortress. They took out scrolls and cast spells on the stone wall. When the power of the spells subsided, the mud in the gaps of the stone wall had turned into hard stone. The stone wall that was originally made of stone had turned into a whole piece of stone. The stone fort in the middle of the fortress also turned into a stone carving with the help of magic. Feng Chou estimated that its sturdiness wasn't inferior to the cement bunkers in his previous life. As soon as the fortress was finished, an army of 20 Dro warriors and 40 bear goblin slave soldiers entered the fortress. These Dro warriors were different from the Dro warriors in the patrol team. They looked more serious. The armor on their bodies exuded the power of magic. In addition to being equipped with standard heavy scimitars, they also carried magic heavy crossbows on their backs. Even the goblin bugbears in the army were different from their counterparts in the patrol team. The armor on these goblin bugbears was much thicker, and the workmanship was much better. Each of them carried a thick longbow on their back. Their expressions were solemn, unlike the goblin bugbears in the patrol team who were always drooling over human slaves. After Qiankun Pagoda's scan, more than half of the Dro warriors were level 7 warriors. The 2 leaders were level 8 warriors. Most of the Bear Goblin warriors were level 5 warriors, and a few of them were level 6. After the fortress was completed and the army entered, the patrol team escorted the human slaves, including the artisan slaves, and continued to move along the road. Along the way, Feng Chou found that about every kilometer, there was a fortress smaller than the entrance of the cave under construction. The 2 fortresses closest to the cave had already been repaired, and the 3rd fortress was about to be completed. The team moved along the road close to the cave wall for more than 10 kilometers, but Feng Chou still couldn't see the end of the road. After passing through 14 fortresses, they stopped 1 kilometer away from the 14th fortress and began to build a new fortress. The scale of the new stronghold was smaller, and the slaves already had experience, so the construction speed was much faster, and it was completed in half a month. After the fortress was completed, the slave team continued to move forward. After they moved forward for more than 10 kilometers, Feng Chou finally saw the exit to the surface world. It was a rather large cave, and the entrance was more than 30 meters wide. Unlike other underground caverns, this one had an obvious upward slope. The reason why Feng Chou was sure that this was the cave that led to the surface was because he saw a lot of humans in the Drow camp located in this cave. Although they saw the exit, Feng Chou and Simon felt despair. This was because they saw not only humans in the camp, but also a large number of Drow warriors, as well as female Drow priestesses. They even saw the silhouettes of spider elves. Among the Drow elves, the priestesses had a much higher status than the warriors. Arcane Universe Chapter 24. A bear goblin crept towards Feng Chou's position. There were many human slaves sleeping on this dry and stony land. What the drooling bear goblin didn't know was that there was a more hidden figure behind him. Feng Chou was familiar with the figure. He quickly judged that it was a tigerman in beast form. Under Qiankun Pagoda's scan, the tigerman in stealth appeared in Feng Chou's eyes. Its body was humanoid, but its whole body was covered with thick striped hair. Its head was a combination of a tiger and a human face, and its hands were sharp tiger claws. The tigerman was on all fours, and its body was low. Its movements were silent, and it quickly approached the sneaky bear goblin from behind. The tigerman was born with the ability to sneak. Although they couldn't use the power of shadows to hide their existence like rogues, they had camouflage stripes on their bodies. Coupled with the dim light in the underground world, their stealth effect was no worse than that of low-level rogues. If it weren't for Qiankun Pagoda's scanning function, Feng Chou would never have been able to discover the tigerman in stealth. About 10 meters away from Feng Chou, the bear goblin stopped and seemed to be choosing a target. He quickly stared at Feng Chou. Feng Chou looked relatively tall and burly, and seemed to have a lot of meat. He was also excluded from the group of slaves. Among the slaves, this was the performance of a weak chicken. He looked like an excellent target. After choosing a satisfactory target, the bear goblin was about to move, but the Grim Reaper behind him was almost on his back. After entering the best attack range, the tigerman gently pounced on the bear goblin's back. One of his claws scratched the bear goblin's neck like lightning, crushing his subconscious roar. Then, the tigerman picked up the earth spirit bear that was even more burly than him and quickly retreated, entering the underground forest in the blink of an eye. While the tigerman had taken care of the bear goblin, there was also movement in the female architect's tent. The curtain of the tent was opened, and the female architect came out with a thin figure. She used a rope to wrap around the thin human's neck and hung him on a wooden pole erected at the entrance of her tent. After a spasm of struggle, the thin human lost his breath. The female architect admired her masterpiece and returned to her tent as if nothing had happened. The next day, Drow's patrol found that many bear goblin were missing. In the next few days, the bear goblin became well behaved. From the second day onwards, new slaves were escorted every day, but they didn't stay at the construction site. Drows escorted them along the road into the depths of the big cave. According to Qiankun Pagoda's statistics, nearly 1,000 human slaves were escorted over. According to Simon's estimation, this number accounted for almost half of the human slaves in Drow City. In the following period of time, Feng Chou discovered a few more tigerman attacks. These tigermen didn't seem to have high intelligence. They didn't target the slaves in the camp. Instead, They targeted the bugbears in the outer patrols, who seemed to have more meat. When the tigermen attacked for the third time, the drows launched an ambush and killed a few tigermen. Finally, the tigermen's rampant momentum was curbed. A month later, a D-shaped fortress appeared at the entrance of the cave. The D-shaped side was close to the entrance of the cave, completely sealing the entrance of the cave. People who came out of the cave could only enter the fortress through the gate. The semicircular side of the fortress faced the open cave forest. The core of the fortress was a 3-story defensive tower. The tower was twice as tall as the walls outside. During the construction of the fortress, Feng Chou saw the amazing effect of magic in construction. When building the stone wall, the female architect asked the slaves to fill the gaps between the stones with mud. When the stone wall was finished, a few young drow mages wearing hoods came to the fortress. They took out scrolls and cast spells on the stone wall. When the power of the spells subsided, the mud in the gaps of the stone wall had turned into hard stone. The stone wall that was originally made of stone had turned into a whole piece of stone. The stone fort in the middle of the fortress also turned into a stone carving with the help of magic. Feng Chou estimated that its sturdiness wasn't inferior to the cement bunkers in his previous life. As soon as the fortress was finished, an army of 20 drow warriors and 40 bear goblin slave soldiers entered the fortress. These drow warriors were different from the drow warriors in the patrol team. They looked more serious. The armor on their bodies exuded the power of magic. In addition to being equipped with standard heavy scimitars, they also carried magic heavy crossbows on their backs. Even the goblin bugbears in the army were different from their counterparts in the patrol team. The armor on these goblin bugbears was much thicker, and the workmanship was much better. Each of them carried a thick longbow on their back. Their expressions were solemn. Unlike the goblin bugbears in the patrol team who were always drooling over human slaves. After Qiankun Pagoda's scan, more than half of the drow warriors were level 7 warriors. The 2 leaders were level 8 warriors. Most of the bear goblin warriors were level 5 warriors, and a few of them were level 6. After the fortress was completed and the army entered, the patrol team escorted the human slaves, including the artisan slaves, and continued to move along the road. Along the way, Feng Chou found that about every kilometer, there was a fortress smaller than the entrance of the cave under construction. The 2 fortresses closest to the cave had already been repaired, and the third fortress was about to be completed. The team moved along the road close to the cave wall for more than 10 kilometers, but Feng Chou still couldn't see the end of the road. After passing through 14 fortresses, they stopped 1 kilometer away from the 14th fortress and began to build a new fortress. The scale of the new stronghold was smaller, and the slaves already had experience, so the construction speed was much faster, and it was completed in half a month. After the fortress was completed, the slave team continued to move forward. After they moved forward for more than 10 kilometers, Feng Chou finally saw the exit to the surface world. It was a rather large cave, and the entrance was more than 30 meters wide. Unlike other underground caverns, this one had an obvious upward slope. The reason why Feng Chou was sure that this was the cave that led to the surface was because he saw a lot of humans in the drow camp located in this cave. Although they saw the exit, Feng Chou and Simon felt despair. This was because they saw not only humans in the camp, but also a large number of drow warriors, as well as female drow priestesses. They even saw the silhouettes of spider elves. Among the drow elves, the priestesses had a much higher status than the warriors. This was not only because the priestesses were closer to the gods, but also because the priestesses were much stronger than the warriors. The priests or priestesses of this world were not pure spellcasters, but powerful professionals who could cast spells and were proficient in close combat. With the blessing of divine spells, the priestess's close combat ability was much stronger than warriors of the same level. This world was not a game, and there was no balance between the professions. The spider elves were at least high grade, profession level 11 and above drow priestesses, and the abyssal creature demon hunting spider that was at least level 11. Through an evil divine ritual, they formed a twisted creature. This creature was like removing the lower part of the priestess drow, then cutting off the top of the demon hunting spider's head to open a skylight, and transplanting the upper body of the priestess drow. forming a synthetic creature composed of the upper body of a human and the body of a demon-hunting spider. The lower body of this creature could be like a demon-hunting spider, using its pincers and sharp front claws to fight. It could spit out webs to trap the enemy, and could move flexibly on any terrain to fight. It could jump more than 10 meters away like a jumping pearl. Their upper body could cast spells and fight like the priestess Drow, and the spider elves were also trained to be good at throwing javelins. The spider elves would retain the intelligence of their upper body, but they were completely under the control of the priestess Drow who presided over the ritual. Feng Chou saw 2 spider elves in the camp. This in itself was a terrifying force, not to mention that behind these 2 spider elves, there was a high priestess controlling them. With such a force guarding the exit of this passage, Feng Chou felt that his chances of escaping were as slim as none. Simon also looked shocked and depressed. Report, select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 25. When Feng Chou and the others arrived, there were already about 200 slaves clearing and flattening the ground outside the entrance of the cave leading to the surface. It was not difficult to guess that a large fortress was going to be built here, as well as a trading center with humans. To Feng Chou's surprise, when their group of slaves arrived, the female architect who came with them took over the entire project. The slaves were divided into more than 10 groups and began to work on the construction site. Feng Chou even saw the female architect being escorted by several Drow warriors to the Drow camp that led to the surface cave. She entered a large tent and was received by someone. In the following period of time, the human slaves that Feng Chou and the others saw along the way came here in groups and joined the construction site. After more than a month, the entire construction site was filled with nearly 1,000 human slaves. Near the camp, there were even more troglodyte slaves in charge of mining stone, cutting wood, and providing for the needs of the project. After a period of work, the prototype of the fortress gradually appeared in front of Feng Chou. If completed, this would be a large fortress that could accommodate thousands of people, just like the first fortress that Feng Chou and the others built. This was also a D-shaped fortress built according to the cave wall. The width of the fortress reached 500 to 600 meters and the depth was 400 to 500 meters. It was not difficult to see that once the fortress was completed, the entrance to the cave leading to the surface would be completely sealed. Anyone who wanted to go to the surface would have to go through this fortress. Because it had not been completed yet, it was not known how high the outer stone walls were, but it could be seen that the thickness of these stone walls was more than 3 meters. Every 30 meters or so, there was a semicircular defensive tower protruding out of the stone walls to increase the defensive power of the walls. This fortress not only attached importance to the defense of the cave, but also the defense of the cave entrance leading to the surface was even tighter. From the entrance of the cave to the depth of 40 meters, it was all remodeled and rebuilt with the help of the mage's stone to mud. Here, there were 4 groups of slaves working at the same time. Feng Chou and Simon mixed in with the 4 groups and took the opportunity to spy on the inside of the cave. From the foundation of the cave, it could be seen that there would be 4 defensive towers built here, 2 at the entrance of the cave and 2 at the depth of 40 meters. Feng Chou guessed that in the end, 2 walls would be built along the cave wall, sandwiching this passage in the middle. If 2 more gates were built between the 4 towers, then this section of the cave could be used as a foundation to build a barbican with a ceiling. Feng Chou and Simon mingled here for a few days and gradually saw the Drow army stationed in the cave. This army was not large in number, only about 100 people, but all of them were elites. Even the lowest level of Drow warriors were generally 8th or 9th level existences. The captain was already a high-grade warrior, and there were 2 high-grade priests with 2 spider elves. The 2 also had a priest team composed of mid-grade priests. As everyone knew, the combination of warriors and priests was not an addition, but a multiplication. Such a force was almost comparable to the Lord's Guards in Ontalia County. This powerful Drow army was stationed in the cave leading to the surface, blocking their way out. After a few days of observation, Feng Chou and Simon mixed out again in disappointment, slowly moving to the edge of the construction site. The 2 of them had almost given up on the idea of leaving the underground world, but they also didn't plan to return to Thorn City. because once they returned to the underground city, it wasn't hard to imagine that they would never have the opportunity to come back to this cave again once they thought about the first fortress they built. Therefore, they planned to escape to the underground forest to hide. Although the underground forest was dangerous and there were terrible Taigermen here, they would rather take the risk and look for opportunities in the underground forest than return to the underground city and be slaves for the rest of their lives. According to Simon's idea, since they were going to leave, they should leave now. If by any chance they could not leave after a few days, it would be too late to regret it. However, Feng Chou felt that they could wait, the reason being that the underground forest was too dangerous. Almost every day, Taigermen wandered around the periphery of the construction site, and almost every day, unlucky troglodyte slaves were hunted down. Drow's patrols had collided with Taigermen more than once, but they were unable to disperse them. This group of Taigermen seemed to have set this place as a fixed hunting ground. Feng Chou originally thought that with Drow's ruthlessness, it would not take long for him to organize people to eliminate this annoying Taigermen tribe. But after such a long time, Dro did not make any move, which could not help but make people feel strange. When did Dro become so easy to bully? What was even more strange was that this huge and rich cave was only 30 kilometers away from Thorn City, but Dro did not want to control it. Instead, he built so many defensive fortresses here. If I were Dro, instead of building so many fortresses, why not control the entire cave? If they could clean up this cave, then they would only need to control all the entrances and exits around the cave to control this huge and rich cave. At that time, not only could they ensure the smooth flow of the trade route, but they could also use this rich cave to open up more farmland and feed more people. But why didn't Dro do this? This point was easy to see, and Dro would never have thought of it. The only explanation was that there was a strong local force in this cave. This local force was so strong that Dro did not dare to have extravagant hopes of controlling this place. Combined with the appearance of the Taigermen and Drow's weakness, then the local forces here were on the verge of appearing. There must be one or more powerful Taigermen tribes here. This fertile underground forest was enough to nurture a few powerful Tigermen tribes. If there really was a powerful Taigermen tribe, then this forest was extremely dangerous. Taigermen were the best hunters in the wilderness. They were powerful, as fast as lightning, and had a keen sense of hearing and smell. They were natural predators and trackers. Feng Chou and the other two entered the forest. Once they were targeted by the Taigermen, it would be extremely difficult to escape. Any adult Taigerman would be difficult for them to fight against. So, Feng Chou's idea was to stay here first, and wait until the project was almost completed before leaving. They would hide nearby to see if there was a chance to escape during the handover after the project was completed. If there was no chance, then wait until the transaction to see if there was a chance to sneak out. Of course, the prerequisite was that they could survive until then. After listening to Feng Chou's analysis, Simon thought for a while and expressed his approval. They stayed. 2 months later, the fortress was basically completed. The only thing left was for the mages to use the mud to stone spell to solidify the entire project, as well as the installation of some large war machines. In these 2 months, Feng Chou and the others did not see even the slightest chance. After the fortress was basically completed, the slaves were chased out of the fortress to avoid interfering with the mages' casting. For the slaves, this was a terrible disaster because this meant that more people would become the prey of the Taigermen. But for Feng Chou and Simon, this was a good opportunity, because they knew that there were Taigermen hiding in the forest. Looking for firewood for cooking became a task that everyone shirked. When Feng Chou and Simon made a bet that they dared to go into the forest to collect firewood, everyone unanimously squeezed them to fulfill their promise. The two pretended to bite the bullet and went into the forest, never to return. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 26. No one would take these two idiots seriously, and the patrols wouldn't risk entering the woods for them, so the two of them easily obtained their freedom. After entering the woods, Feng Chou asked Qiankun Pagoda to analyze all the traces left behind by the Taigerman within the range of the scanner, and try to avoid the Taigerman's route of activity. find a relatively safe direction, and run with Simon all the way. In this forest near the stronghold, there were often tigermen hunting, so this forest was actually very dangerous. Their luck wasn't too bad. Under the guidance of Qiankun Pagoda, the two of them quickly left the area where the traces of the tigermen were relatively more concentrated. Under the guidance of Qiankun Pagoda, Feng Chou and Simon not only avoided the traces of the tigermen's activity, but also avoided the traces of other large and medium underground creatures. In one breath, they ran for 700 to 800 meters before stopping. The two of them didn't want to go too far from the stronghold. After all, that was where their hope of escape lay. After stopping, Feng Chou circled around the vicinity, and made sure that there were no traces of the tigermen or other large creatures within 100 meters. The two of them temporarily stayed here. The reason why they chose this place was because there was a giant mushroom that was the tallest in the vicinity. The stem of this mushroom was completely lignified, and was very hard. Feng Chou climbed up the stem of the mushroom with the help of 2 knives, and hid under the mushroom cap to observe the stronghold in the distance. For Feng Chou to suddenly take out 2 knives, Simon was a little surprised, but didn't think it was too strange. Who didn't have a little secret? In fact, these 2 knives were just made by Qiankun Pagoda with the bear goblin's mace. For Qiankun Pagoda, melting a piece of pig iron, removing the impurities, changing its carbon content, turning it into a piece of high-quality steel, and then forging it into the shape he wanted, it was completely effortless. The fortress hadn't changed much since they left. Even if the drone knew that they had escaped, they probably wouldn't risk sending people into the mushroom forest to capture them. Feng Chou watched for a while, and just as he was about to give up, he saw something moving at high speed in the mushroom forest not far from them. Feng Chou was shocked. He thought it was a tigerman, but when he looked carefully, he saw a human running in the forest. Because the surface forest needed to make use of the sunlight as much as possible, the tree canopy was often layered, making it difficult to see far into the distance. The underground forest was different. Although the mushroom canopy also covered the ground, it was not evenly distributed. In some places, the canopy was stacked in layers, and in other places, it was very sparse, revealing large areas of low plants and the ground. Therefore, Feng Chou could clearly see that the person running at full speed was a human. Feng Chou hurriedly slipped down the mushroom stem and said to Simon, who was on guard under the tree, "There is also an escaped slave over there. Judging from his running speed, his strength is not weak. Let's go stop him and see if we can cooperate." Feng Chou and Simon were like drowning people at this time. Even if there was a straw, they would grab it. What if someone else knew something that they didn't have? So Simon didn't hesitate to agree to Feng Chou's suggestion and followed Feng Chou to run towards the man's route. With Qiankun Pagoda's calculation of speed and route, they accurately blocked the man's path. For someone to suddenly appear in front of him, the man was shocked. He stopped and pulled out 2 heavy dosimeters from his back. When he saw that it was 2 humans who intercepted him, he seemed to be slightly relieved. When they saw the person clearly, Feng Chou and Simon's faces lit up with joy, because this person was someone they knew. This person was the female architect who had been directing them to work. This woman came from the inner city and had a closer relationship with Dro than the slaves. Moreover, this woman was likely to have grown up in Thorn City. If she could escape, she must know something that the two of them didn't know. Architect Anru, it seems that you also have plans to escape from the underground world. Are you interested in cooperating with us? Feng Chou said. The female architect named Anru glanced at the two of them, disdainfully curled her lips and said, "Not interested." After saying that, the fierce woman waved 2 scimitars and rushed towards the two of them. Feng Chou cursed in his heart, "FCK," and turned to hide behind Simon. Simon looked back at him in confusion, and Feng Chou gave him a look that said, "Hurry up." At this time, Simon didn't have time to be confused. He reached out and grabbed the clothes around his waist. He tore the clothes on his upper body and the cloth wrapped around his waist and abdomen, revealing 2-foot-long short swords hidden against his back. Simon pulled out the short swords. These 2 short swords were obviously high-quality goods. The blades were dark blue, and it was obvious that they were forged from high-quality black steel. The hilts were inlaid with a special luster of gold and some fine gemstones. This was clearly a pair of enchanted short swords. When Simon took out these two short swords, his entire aura changed. The two of them collided in the blink of an eye. What surprised Feng Chou was that after the two of them started fighting, Simon actually had the upper hand. His fighting style was very strange. His feet were constantly moving, constantly dodging, and the pair of short swords were constantly stabbing, often forcing the female architect to be in a hurry. From Qiankun Pagoda's scan, Simon's agility attribute was not as good as the female architect, but from the perspective of the battle, his agility seemed to be higher than the female architect. After observing for a while, combined with Leo's memory, Feng Chou finally understood that this Simon was not a level 6 warrior at all. He was a level 6 warrior with a level 3 or 4 rogue. Ordinary people without special bloodlines had limited talent, and the ceiling of their profession was very low. Even if they trained hard, they could barely become an intermediate warrior. Level 7 or 8 was the limit of their talent. Such ordinary warriors, after level 6, would have great difficulty in continuing to advance. At this time, if these warriors wanted to continue to improve their strength, the best way was to take a part-time job. A level 6 warrior, through the primary training of a rogue, could not only improve his agility, but also gain some abilities and skills of a rogue, which greatly improved his combat effectiveness and survivability. For example, if an ordinary level 6 warrior continued to train as a warrior, it would be very difficult to reach level 8. Many warriors with insufficient talent may not be able to reach level 8 in their lifetime, but if they started from the beginning, they could easily increase their rogue level by 3 or 4 levels. A level 6 warrior with a level 4 rogue's combat effectiveness was basically the same as a level 8 warrior. Therefore, in the middle and low levels, some professionals with insufficient talent would tend to pursue a part-time job, but after reaching a senior level, the benefits of a part-time job would be discounted, and the part-time job itself would delay the professional's time, making the highest achievement that they could achieve lower. In short, a part-time job was a good choice for ordinary middle and low-level professionals, but for those who were aspiring to become masters, it became a waste of time. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 27. In order to expand his territory, his Leo's father promised to give him land as a reward. Simon's expression also some friends he knew when he was a mercenary. Everyone in the room looked at Simon with schadenfreude, and the strongest one was a level 7 rogue, while others hated in the depths of their eyes. The experts under his father's command were all his mentors. Therefore, Leo was still very familiar with the fighting style of rogue. Them, but Feng Chou had not completely turned Leo's memory into his own. The reason why he suddenly thought that Simon might be a part-time rogue from his fighting style and made good many of Leo's memories about rogues appeared in Feng Chou's mind. Against the leaders of the other stone houses, Feng Chou quickly saw that Simon had the rogue specialty of reflex evasion. Reflex evasion referred to the rogue's ability to make dodging instinctively through some special training methods, thus greatly improving their ability to dodge. Low-level rogues could fight with warriors of the same level by relying on this specialty. Feng Chou also saw that Simon also had the ability of shadow once in a while. Rogues could obtain the special ability to master shadow energy through some special professional rituals. But at low levels, the shadow power they mastered was still very weak and could only provide some cover for their stealth and increase the concealment of their stealth. Some experienced low-level rogues could use their weak shadow power in battle. They could use shadow power to hide and confuse their attack intent, or use shadow power to harass the enemy's line of sight. Simon was obviously an experienced rogue. Through observation, Feng Chou judged that Simon should be a level 6 warrior and a level 3 rogue. Perhaps Simon's agility had reached the lower limit of a level 4 rogue, but he should not have mastered some important abilities of a level 4 rogue. Otherwise, in the battle just now, he had several opportunities to use his level 4 rogue specialty to win the battle. In the battle, Simon not only played the advantages of his role to the fullest, but also played the advantages of his level 6 warrior to the fullest. Every attack of his had both the dexterity and swiftness of a rogue and the ferocity and power of the warrior. He integrated the combat skill heavy strike, which was unique to mid-level warriors and driven by the power of Heidegger, into the rogue's rapid attack technique, sitting on someone else's back, and the harassment and cover of his shadow power. He created opportunities for himself to launch sneak attacks in a head-on battle. Some of his small attacks became extremely terrifying under the enhancement of heavy strike. Every time Simon delivered a heavy blow, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and Rui, as if he was forced to roll or kick in a pathetic manner to deal with it. If it wasn't for the fact that Simon didn't want to kill her, she would have already fallen. Directly proportional to the size of their series of fierce attacks and forced Simon to retreat. She also took the opportunity to retreat quickly and stop the battle. Only when a warrior advanced to the middle rank and produced some mysterious sublimation to the genetic level with me, the overall strength of his body would be improved qualitatively. Took a few steps back at that time and asked, a warrior's plan to stay here and see if there is a chance when the fortress is handed over. What are your plans? The improvement in his physical fitness wasn't due to an increase in his size. If you want to escape, it was due to the genetic changes that the golden dragon bloodline had made to Feng Chou were overjoyed. His physical appearance was at most that of a second good idea. And Rui said, I think we'd better leave here first. No one will care if you escape, but if someone finds out that there must be a reason, Dro will definitely send people to hunt me down. Warriors in this slave area at Feng Chou and said, Simon was the only one, Leo, and lead the way. And Rui said unhappily, Simon didn't lead the way. Does he know where to go? At this moment, Simon many thoughts flashed through Feng Chou's mind, and Rui looked at Feng Chou suspiciously. Feng Chou shrugged between Buck's legs. This is my bloodline talent. Hands were placed on his things around me that others can't. Block the angry kick of the warrior who was close to rank 5. If I sense danger, I will warn you. During the Arcane Empire, the Arcanists had carried out a large number of bloodline experiments. Some of them had failed, such as the Beastman, and some had already prepared such as the Arcane Knight to block, and today's dragon bloodline warlocks, demon warlocks, then dragonborn warriors. Among the newcomers there were regenerative bloodlines, giant bloodlines, take advantage of all kinds of strange fusion bloodlines. After thousands of years of bloodline diffusion, many humans now more or less carried some special bloodlines. It was just that most people would not awaken them. Only a few lucky people or people with a high enough concentration of bloodline would be able to awaken the hidden bloodline vitality. In order to maintain the purity of their bloodline, some warlock families would even only marry within their own warlock families. Therefore, Simon and agility felt that it was natural for Feng Chou to use the bloodline talent to explain Qiankun Pagoda's scanning function. An ordinary simple warrior wouldn't be able to block it and ran into the depths of the forest. Feng Chou was having a hard time following behind the two of them. He gritted his teeth and followed them while reminding them from time to time that there were potential dangers. The three of them ran for a few kilometers in the forest, but they did not even encounter one of the most common spiders in the underground world. The incomparable finally began to pay attention to Feng Chou. She gradually slowed down and began to talk about her plan. The transition of defense is actually the most powerful time in the fortress. Seeing that if you want to take advantage of the transition of defense to sneak out, it will not work at all. If you can hold on until the trade with the humans on the surface begins, you may have a little chance. However, the chances are still very slim because the Dro will not let human slaves without the dark vision to transport the goods. Instead, they will choose the cavemen who are more adapted to the dark. At that time, it will be very difficult for you to sneak into the fortress, even if you can sneak in. He even waited for a moment for you to sneak into the human caravan on the surface and leave. Simon could not help but ask, then what are you going to do? And Rui said, this cave is called the Tigerman's Cave. It is the richest cave in the underground world within a few hundred kilometers. The Dro warrior on the city has long wanted to occupy this place. Unfortunately, a powerful tiger Tai-German clan is entrenched in this place. And hit the wall this Tai-German clan is said to have a population of more than 300 people. After not only do they have the inheritance of barbarians, but they also have the inheritance of his right foot on the ground. Even the powerful Thorn City does not dare to lightly start a war. With this fearing that the Tai-German had the inheritance of barbarians and shamans, his right fist could not help but suck in a breath of cannonball. Although the Thai-German had low intelligence, they were still far smarter than wild beasts. Into the wall 3 meters away and could barely be regarded as an intelligent race. People who didn't know what they could inherit some simple and low-level professions. The Thai-German's innate biological level was as high as level 8, but because of the lack of equipment and training, a well-trained level 7 warrior could easily kill a Tigerman. If the Tai-German tribe had the inheritance of professions, he was paralyzed. The Tai-German could be trained. Once the Tai-German were trained, their formidable strength would be developed. Barbarians, also known as berserkers, were an ancient profession. According to Leo's memory, ever since the god of war, Haiger, created the Haiger's strength and popularized it among the warriors. The ancient profession of barbarians had been eliminated from the human race. The Haiger's strength was an ability to bring out the potential of a living being. Before the god of war, Haiger, invented this ability. Stimulating the potential of a living being had always been the patent of barbarians. Barbarians could master the ability to stimulate the hidden potential of their body through training and psychological stimulation. This ability was called the berserk technique. The berserk technique was a crude and difficult to control way of stimulating one's potential. Through this method, barbarians could stimulate all the potential in their body in a short period of time and form a terrifying fighting strength. However, after the berserk technique, the barbarian would enter a weakened state and their fighting strength would sharply decrease. On the other hand, the Haiger's strength was a systematic and orderly way of using the potential of the human body. Through this method, warriors could master some battle techniques that were far beyond their own strength limit. For example, heavy strike was one of the most basic techniques. This kind of battle technique allowed warriors to use their potential in an orderly manner and thus not enter a weakened state. In addition to the berserk technique, barbarians could also use herbs, rituals, and special techniques to obtain a powerful ability to reduce damage. This ability was somewhat similar to the legendary Golden Bell Shield and Iron Skin in Feng Chou's previous life. Barbarians also mastered the training method of instinct evasion. This ability allowed barbarians to have a keen sense of danger. They could dodge before they realized the danger and avoid sneak attacks and pincers. With these abilities combined, the ancient barbarians did not need heavy equipment to fight against fully armed ancient warriors. However, when the warriors also mastered the Haiger's strength, barbarians began to lag behind the warriors and were gradually eliminated from the human race. After thousands of years of diffusion, the Haiger's strength had eliminated most of the barbarian inheritance in the civilized races. However, in some wild races, this profession system was still passed down. Report select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 28 The barbarian inheritance could be said to be a perfect match for the Tai-German, who had low intelligence in the wilderness. With only 1 or 2 years of systematic training, the Tai-German could easily obtain 2 or 3 barbarian levels. At level 3 barbarian level, they could train the intuition evasion ability. At level 4, they could hold their first damage reduction ceremony, which could greatly increase the fighting strength of the Tai-German. Once an 8th level Tigerman obtained a level 5 barbarian level and mastered berserk, he would become a terrible killing machine. Shamans were also an ancient spellcaster inheritance. These spellcasters were good at healing, soul control, totem casting, and many buff spells, which could greatly increase the fighting strength of groups. With such a force, it was no wonder that Thorn City didn't dare to deal with it. With Thorn City's strength, it wouldn't be difficult to eliminate these 300 Tai-German. The difficult part is how to ensure that we don't suffer too much damage. Otherwise, not only would it be difficult to eat the Tai-German's cave, but we might also attract the attention of the enemy because of casualties, Anru said. So, I think that the only way we can escape from the underground is to provoke a war between the Tai-German and Dro. Hearing Anru's words, Feng Chou and Simon gasped. Simon was silent for a moment, then asked, "What are you going to do?" Anru said, "The Taigerman's intelligence isn't high and they are easily angered. I have some ideas, but I don't know if they will work. I will tell you when we reach the Taigerman's tribe." Feng Chou and Simon looked at each other and saw the doubt in each other's eyes. Whether it was the Taigerman or the Drow elves, the three of them were like ants. How could 3 ants provoke a war between 2 tigers? The innate Taigerman's intelligence was indeed not high. They had even lost the human language and could only rely on some simple roars to communicate. Therefore, to humans, these Taigermen were almost a kind of beast that could not be communicated with, let alone instigate them. Although they were suspicious, Anru didn't want to say more, so the two didn't ask. Anru was obviously well prepared. He took Simon and Feng Chou through the mushroom forest for dozens of minutes and arrived at a Taigerman's tribe more than 10 kilometers away from the fort. The Tigermen tribe was located near the center of the cave, not far from the waterfall hanging from the top of the cave. This waterfall formed a lake in the middle of the cave. The Taigerman tribe was located on a high ground near the lake. Whether it was on the surface or in the underground world, water was the source of life. This lake was probably the source of water for most of the creatures in this cave. It was definitely a good idea for the Taigerman to stay here and hunt. The 3 of them peeked at the distant Tigermen tribe from afar. All of them were trembling with fear. It was as if an unarmed ordinary person was peeping at a group of lions on the prairie. As long as any of the lions were alarmed, they would die without a burial place. At this time, Anru finally revealed his plan. The Taigermen value their cubs very much. It is said that they will kill all creatures that harm their cubs. If we can steal a few cubs, leave the scent of blood along the way, and finally throw the cubs out of the fortress, the gluttonous bear goblin will definitely not give up on delicious food that is delivered to its mouth. When the time comes, the Taigerman will chase after them. Maybe, Simon said angrily. Are you crazy? Stealing cubs from the Taigerman's tribe? Even a high-grade rogue can't do that, right? The Taigerman's sense of smell is 10 times more sensitive than a dog's. We don't need to go into the tribe. We just need to get a little closer, and we will be discovered. Anru took out a turbid glass bottle from a pocket on his chest, pointed to the colorful round particles inside, and said, "We can use candy to lure the cubs out." Simon said incredulously, "This is your idea." Feng Chou also couldn't help but have the urge to cover his eyes. Simon pointed to the glass bottle in his hand and asked, "How can you be sure that the cubs will be lured out, and not the adult ones? If the adult ones are lured out, they will definitely be able to smell us in addition to the candy. What should we do then?" Anru took out another similar glass bottle from her pocket. This bottle seemed to contain some kind of liquid. She pointed to the bottle and said, "The master of the Sorcerer Tower in Thorn City, Master Caramel, seems to be studying the blood of the Taigerman, so he sent people to capture some Taigerman from the Taigerman's cave and raised them. I spent a lot of effort to get this bottle of Taigerman's urine. We just need to smear the Taigerman's urine on our bodies to cover our human smell." Hearing what Anru said, Simon's face looked a little better. He thought for a moment. Although he still felt that it was not reliable, he didn't have any better ideas. He said helplessly, "Then let's try it first." The Taigerman's sense of smell was very sensitive. For safety, they were lurking on a small slope 700 or 800 meters away from the Taigerman's nest. They could just see the Taigerman's nest on the high ground in the distance. At such a distance, the Taigerman certainly couldn't smell the candy. If they wanted to use the candy to lure the cubs in the tribe, they must put the candy in a place close enough to the Taigerman's nest. Who would go? Of course, it was none other than Simon. Simon also knew that he was the most suitable person to do this, so he didn't refuse. With the help of Feng Chou and Anru, he smeared the Taigerman's urine all over his body. Feng Chou and Anru also helped each other smear the Taigerman's urine all over their bodies. After that, the 3 of them sneaked toward the Taigerman's nest. Fortunately, there was no wind in the cave, so they didn't have to worry about the direction of the wind. The 3 of them sneaked closer to the Taigerman's nest. Feng Chou and Anru stopped, and Simon continued to sneak forward. When Simon was around, Feng Chou didn't feel anything. But when Simon was a little farther away, he found that Simon's figure was very vague in the dark underground. It was only about 10 meters away, but he became a vague shadow that was difficult to recognize if you didn't look carefully. The brilliance of a rogue's stealth was that they could not only hide themselves with shadows, but they could also use the power of shadows to seal and weaken the weak sounds and smells they emitted. Simon took the risk to sneak closer to the Tigerman's nest, dropped a candy, and turned back. Every 10 steps he took, he dropped a candy until he returned to Feng Chou's side. With the help of a short knife, Feng Chou climbed up a giant mushroom, hid behind the mushroom's stem, and carefully observed the place where Simon dropped the first candy. Soon after Simon came back, Feng Chou saw 2 adult Tigermen coming to the first candy. The 3 of them quickly evacuated without saying a word. The 3 of them returned to the top of the slope where they had looked at the Tigerman's nest before. They found that the 2 Tigermen didn't chase after them. After they picked up all the candy, they returned to the nest and breathed a long sigh of relief. Next, the 3 of them tried a few more times, but every time they lured out adult Tigermen, making it very dangerous. They had to give up. After giving up, Anru looked very depressed. Simon didn't think highly of this idea, but it didn't matter. He just couldn't think of any good ideas, so he was a little anxious. Feng Chou looked at the Tigerman's nest in the distance thoughtfully. Report, select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 29 Novel. High in the center of the Tigerman's nest, there was a tall totem pole painted with various colors. Around the totem pole, there were dozens of simple triangular shacks. Each shack represented a Tigerman's family. The closer the shack to the totem pole, the bigger the shack, and the more Tigerman's family members lived in it. The Tigerman's nest did not have a wall. As the most powerful group in this crypt, they did not need a wall. In front of the Tigerman's nest, there was a small path. After the path was more than 200 meters away from the nest, it split into 2 parallel paths, one to the left, and the other to the right. What did the path mean? It meant that every time the Tigerman left the nest, they would follow a fixed route. It meant that they would not move around casually near the nest. Thinking about it, it was very simple. As the most powerful creature's nest in this crypt, no prey would dare to come near it. The Tigerman would not be able to catch any prey near the nest. Since there was no prey, these Tigermen naturally wouldn't move around the nest frequently. They would take the best and most convenient path and directly leave the nest to hunt in the distance. Over time, they stepped out of the nest and created a path near the nest. What did this mean? This meant that the area near the nest should be dark under the Tigerman's lamp. As long as they avoided the path, the Tigerman's nest should be relatively safe. Feng Chou told Simon and Anru his speculation, which slightly reduced the anxiety in their hearts. Judging from the direction of the path, the Tigerman's main hunting ground should be around the lake. They were hiding in the right direction. In the next few days, the 3 of them took turns to observe the Tigerman's nest. They hoped to find out the pattern of their activities and see if they could find an opportunity. After 7 or 8 days of observation, they found that the Tigerman hunted about once every 3 days. During the hunt, the young and strong in the tribe, regardless of gender, would leave and split into a dozen hunting teams. Only the old and weak would be left in the nest. It seemed that these creatures had been dominating this place for a long time. They did not pay much attention to the defense of the nest. On the 9th day, when the adult members of the Tigerman tribe went out to hunt again, Feng Chou and the others began to try again. This time, they were not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, they hid in a place closer to the nest. Simon sneaked closer to the tiger's den and waited quietly. This was because they had discovered that every time the young Tigerman went out to hunt, there would be Tigerman cubs that would sneak out of their nests to play. They had been waiting for this opportunity. Their hard work paid off, and they finally found a tiger cub that had slipped out of the nest. Simon quickly retreated and threw out candy along the way. This time, they successfully lured over 2 half-grown tiger cubs. However, they didn't touch the 2 cubs. Instead, they let them finish the jelly beans and leave. Simon quietly followed behind the 2 tiger cubs. When they returned to the nest, he once again dropped the candy along the way and retreated. just as they had expected. The 2 Tigerkin cubs soon snuck out with the other 4 Tigerkin cubs and found Jellybean again. They happily followed Jellybean into Feng Chou's ambush. This time, Simon and the others finally made their move. Anru took out a magic scroll. This was a general scroll that stored the level 1 spell Mute Ward. The so-called general scroll was a magic scroll that could be used even if one wasn't a spellcaster, as long as one was trained. Mute Ward was a level 1 spell that could turn an area with a diameter of 10 meters into a silent zone. In this zone, sound couldn't be transmitted in any form. Anru activated the scroll, and the Mute Ward enveloped the 6 tiger cubs. Then, Anru and Simon each took a stick and rushed into the ward. They simply and violently knocked out the 6 tiger cubs. Then, the 3 of them carried 2 tiger cubs each and quickly retreated. On the way out, the 3 of them could be said to be overwhelmed with emotions and trembling with fear. They were overwhelmed with emotions because they had actually done something that they originally thought was impossible. They were on tenterhooks because they were afraid that the Tigerman would catch up too quickly. If that happened, they would make a fool of themselves and bring about their own destruction. The 3 of them used all their strength and madly ran in the direction of the stronghold. The more distance they ran, the more relieved they felt. When the 3 of them ran for about 3 kilometers, a mournful roar suddenly came from the direction of the Tigerman's nest behind them. Hearing this roar, Feng Chou and the other 2 felt despair. With the speed of the Tigerman, a distance of 3 kilometers was simply not enough for them to run back to the stronghold before the Tigerman caught up. Despite the despair in their hearts, the 3 of them were determined people. They didn't give up and ran even harder. What Feng Chou and the others didn't know was that the roar just now was just the cry of the old and weak Tigerman in the nest to summon the young and strong Tigerman. It would take some time for the young and strong Tigerman who went out to hunt to return to the nest and catch up. Fortunately, Feng Chou and the other 2's physique was far superior to that of ordinary people, so they could run for more than 10 kilometers continuously. When the 3 of them returned to the vicinity of the stronghold, they just happened to see the official garrison of the stronghold from Thorn City and the previous temporary garrison from before taking over. The new garrison was composed of a high-order priest leading a small team of intermediate priests, and a squadron of 100 drow warriors, plus 200 bear goblin slave soldiers. The elite level of this garrison was slightly worse than the temporary garrison, but with the addition of 200 bear goblin slave soldiers who were basically level 5 and above, their fighting strength was not weak. Several patrols stationed in the stronghold were lined up outside the stronghold gate to welcome the new garrison. The 3 of them put the 6 Tigerman cubs in the forest not far from the stronghold gate. When Simon and Anru put down the 6 Tigerman cubs, their attacks were extremely heavy. Running all the way, 3 of the 6 Tigerman cubs were already dead, and the remaining 3 were dying, so they didn't have to worry about them running away. The 3 of them put down the Tigerman cubs, and Simon conveniently cut off the head of a Tigerman who was still breathing. The blood sprayed far away, and the air was suddenly filled with the smell of blood. After throwing down the Tigerman in his hand, Feng Chou somewhat reluctantly looked at the Tigerman he left behind, and then turned to leave. The 3 of them quickly retreated hundreds of meters away, and only stopped near the cave wall. They still didn't feel at ease, so they sprinkled the remaining Tigerman urine on themselves. The new garrison quickly entered the stronghold, and drow warriors at the gate also entered the stronghold gate. Because the bear goblin in the patrol team had poor discipline, their captain Drow was afraid that they would mess up the handover, so he left them outside the gate. The smell of the Tigerman cub's blood quickly drifted to the bear goblin's nose. Although the bear goblin's intelligence was higher than the Tigerman's by nature, but it was also very limited. Some bear goblin were quickly driven by instinct to chase after the smell of blood. When these bear goblin discovered the fresh Tigerman cubs lying on the ground, they didn't even think about it, and pounced on them, fighting over them and gorging themselves. The smell of blood and the roars of the bear goblin fighting over the Tigerman quickly attracted more bear goblin. One of the faster bear goblins snatched the Tigerman cub that Feng Chou was reluctant to part with. He didn't notice that there was a pagoda-shaped birthmark under the fur on the Tigerman cub's chest. He also didn't notice that when he bit off the Tigerman cub's neck, The pagoda-shaped birthmark moved to his chest. Report, select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation. Arcane Universe Chapter 30 Novel High. The 6 Tidgerkin cubs were quickly eaten up by the bear goblin. When the Tigerman arrived, they saw a group of earth spirit bugbears and a ground full of Tigerman cubs' blood. The Tidgerkin roared furiously and pounced on the bear goblin. When the bear goblin with the pagoda birthmark on its chest had its neck bitten off by a Tidgerkin, the pagoda birthmark moved to the Tidgerkin's chest. The Tidgerkin flattened the bear goblin in the blink of an eye and rushed in through the open gate of the fortress. The drow reacted quickly and immediately organized a counterattack. They wanted to push the Tigerman out of the fortress gate, but the Tigerman kept rushing in from the gate. The gate of the fortress was crowded, and the Tigerman at the back simply climbed the wall to get in. As the fortress had not been officially opened, there were no guards on the walls. The Tidgerkin with sharp tiger claws climbed the stone wall as if it was flat ground. A fierce battle that drow and the elves could not understand unfolded. Feng Chou and the other two who were watching from afar almost cheered. Simon and Anru were excited, but for some reason, Feng Chou looked a little anxious. The battle ended with the Tidgerkin's Pyrrhic victory. More than 300 Tidgerkin came in full force, but less than 30 of them were able to walk back. After confirming that all the Tidgerkin had retreated from the fortress and entered the depths of the underground forest, Feng Chou and the other two quietly returned to the fortress. When they entered the fortress, everything in front of them was like hell. Inside the fortress, 600 to 700 corpses were piled up in a small area. There were even corpses piled up on top of each other in some places. Blood flowed and gathered, even forming small blood puddles in some low-lying areas. While Simon and Anru rushed up to take some of the high-grade drow's equipment, Feng Chou followed his connection with Qiankun Pagoda and flipped over a few corpses. He saw a snow-white jade pagoda lying under a Tidgerkin's corpse. Feng Chou reached out and touched the jade pagoda lightly. The jade pagoda disappeared, and a pagoda birthmark appeared on his chest. After retrieving the jade pagoda, Feng Chou let out a long sigh of relief. He did not have time to check the loot from Qiankun Pagoda and joined Simon and Anru in looting the spoils of war. After the three hurriedly took some of the high-grade drow's equipment, they hurriedly passed through the fortress and entered the cave that they had been thinking about day and night. On the surface, Simon and Anru's loot of the loot was more than Feng Chou after all. Feng Chou was the weakest. The two of them occupied the best batch of equipment, but in fact, Feng Chou's loot was more than 10 times more than theirs. This was because the two of them could only use their hands to carry the equipment, but Feng Chou had a mini chiliocosm. When the two of them were not paying attention, Feng Chou even took dozens of corpses and put them into Qiankun Pagoda. If it were not for the fact that Qiankun Pagoda could not be exposed, Feng Chou would have emptied the entire fortress, let alone the corpses on the ground. After entering the cave, Simon asked, "Have you thought about it? The exit on the surface of this cave might be guarded by humans who are working with these drow. How are we going to get out?" Anru said, "Don't worry, this cave leads to a huge cave system. There is more than one exit." Simon was relieved when he heard this. The three of them walked along the slanted cave for about 2 to 3 kilometers. The ground under their feet began to level out, but the cave began to become more complicated. More and more forked caves appeared in front of them. As they walked, Feng Chou seemed to have discovered something. There was an expression on his face that said, "I knew it." The reason for this expression was that Feng Chou recognized this cave. When Leo was young, he knew that there was a deep and complicated cave not far to the east of his father's castle. But at that time, people did not know that the cave was so deep. For many years, this cave was treated as an ordinary cave and was not taken seriously. It was not until the children of the people in his father's territory got lost in the cave that his father sent people to search the cave. Only then did they realize that the cave was so deep and so big. After some exploration, people found that the cave was connected to a huge cave system with more than one exit. Later, the children were found in the cave. They were just a little frightened and were not injured. After finding the children, although they were far from understanding the entire cave, Leo's father stopped further exploration of the cave. More than a year ago, Liu's father planned to build a dam and an irrigation canal in the valley in the east of his territory. With the dam and the irrigation canal, thousands of acres of fertile land could be cultivated at the foot of the mountain in the east. However, it was a little far from the castle. Generally speaking, the radiation range of a castle was at most 5 kilometers. Beyond this range, the time spent on the road would not be worth it, but the distance from the foot of the mountain to the castle was more than 10 kilometers. In this world, humans could not live in the wilderness without any form of defense. For ordinary farmers, that would be like sending meat to the jaws of gnolls or other wild creatures. Even the smallest territory had to have walls, arrow towers, and simple stone castles, as well as other defensive facilities. But Liu's father, the Knight of Eric, did not have the money to build a new castle, so he set his eyes on the cave. The cave was very dry and had no moisture. It was spacious and well ventilated. Not only could people live in it, but it could also store food. The Knight of Eric planned to transform the cave into a fortress with defensive functions. For this purpose, Liu's father planned to thoroughly explore the cave to make sure there were no dangerous creatures in it. The first few explorations went smoothly. After making sure it was safe, Liu, who had returned home from the magic school, was even allowed to explore the cave. But as the exploration went deeper, people seemed to have made an amazing discovery. Liu did not know what happened next because his father did not tell him about the amazing discovery. More than a month later, on the night before Liu went back to school, a group of Drow raided his father's castle. In fact, when Simon guessed that there was a passage to the underground world in Liu's territory, Feng Chou thought of this cave through Liu's memory, but he was not sure, so he did not say it out loud. Under the guidance of Feng Chou, the three of them successfully drilled out of a narrow cave behind the mountain peak. Fortunately, when they came out, it was night. If it was daytime, their eyes would not be able to adapt to the strong light outside. Seeing the stars again, the three of them were very excited, but their expressions were different. Simon knelt on the ground with his hands crossed in front of his chest. He muttered to himself as if he was praying, and Rui stared blankly at the stars in the sky. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Feng Chou clenched his fist tightly, suppressing his urge to shout to the sky. After a few minutes, the three of them controlled their emotions. Under the guidance of Feng Chou, they crossed a ravine, walked along the hillside for a distance, and climbed up a ridge. When the three of them reached the top of the ridge, an endless plain vaguely appeared in their vision under the dim light of dawn. Report. Select text and click report to let us know about any bad translation.